Hello, good morning, everybody. How are we feeling this morning? Nice, fit, fresh, caffeinated, fully ready to go. Welcome to day 2 of ECA's Women's Football Summit. We have another dynamic program to look forward to this morning. We're going to be hearing about the findings of the research into women's football fandom. We will be discussing the club women's football competition landscape, which is quite a thorny topic for many, I know. And we'll be in conversation with one of the legends of the women's game in Europe, Jean-Michel Aulas. Now, to that end, you might want to grab a translation device if you haven't as yet. If you need to translate into English, then it will be channel 1 and channel 2 for French. Jean-Michel coming up a little bit later on. Now, I've started commentating on the NWSL this season, in addition to my work here on the WSL for Sky, and it has been absolutely fascinating to see the differences between the two leagues and how they do things there compared to here and in Europe generally. So I'm particularly delighted to welcome our next guest this morning in our very first session. Back in April, the NWSL announced that it had awarded expansion rights for team number 14 to an investment group representing the Bay Area of California. It is fascinating that they're going to be making a record-breaking $125 million investment in the new club. It's going to be the first major appearance now by a senior executive since unveiling the new name, the new brand, and the brand new logo just a few weeks ago. So we are absolutely delighted that Ali Wagner has flown into London to be with us today. She's a former USA international, as I'm sure you're aware. She's a colleague of mine on Fox Sports World Cup coverage coming up, and also from Qatar just before. And now, of course, she is co-founder of Bay FC. Ali Wagner.
If the squad ain't with me, then it ain't right. Yeah.
Time to bring the bass
yeah. Hey. Same squad, same squad, same squad. Drop top, coupe, Dodge raindrops. Big back plays on FaceTime. Squad ain't with me, then it ain't right. Same squad, same squad, same squad. Drop top, coupe, Dodge raindrops. Big back plays on FaceTime. Squad ain't with me, then it ain't right. Same squad, same squad, same squad. I came up, who I was down with. You change up, stay far from around me. I came up, who I was down with. You change up, stay far from around me. Same squad, same squad, same squad. Drop top, coupe, Dodge raindrops. Big back plays on FaceTime. Squad ain't with me, then it ain't right. Ay.
Oh, come on. If that doesn't get you excited about women's soccer, I don't know what will. As Jackie said, by the way, you took all the good stuff, $125 million investment. That's the headline. If you weren't aware before, NWSL has now expanded to 14 teams. We are that 14th team. There was a 13th team that was announced before us, but they'll be new as well entering the 2024 season. And that means we've actually doubled our footprint from our inception in 2011. So we've gone from 7 to 14 teams, which is a strong statement to the growth that we've seen in NWSL. But most importantly, Bay FC was founded out of a vision that might sound a little bit wild, that might sound a little bit crazy. And nonetheless, it was born from the idea that we want to forever change the landscape of sport. And we want to do that by proving that a women's soccer brand, a women's sport brand, can be a global brand, one of the top global brands, and stand shoulder to shoulder against the iconic brands that we know that happen to be men's, and show that there's that affinity for women's sports in the same way that there is in the men's game. I'm new with this, by the way, so with that, we were able to figure out what our investment group will look like, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but we did partner with Sixth Street. And the thesis with them was that we now had the resources to go and actually turn that vision into a reality. And there's no greater place, really, to do this than in the Bay Area. Because if you're not familiar with us in the San Francisco Bay, we are a group of people that like to disrupt, that like to think big and change what people perceive to be the norms and rewrite history in new ways. We have some of the top global companies, obviously, in the Bay Area, and we just thought this was the right place to try to grab a hold of that mindset, that culture, and not only implement it on the business side, but also on the sporting side, on the soccer side. Because as you guys all know, when you have a club that represents the culture that you live in, the community that you live in, there is that natural affinity for the fandom, for the people to understand what kind of game you're trying to play. So that's going to be part of how we talk about our style of play moving forward. The iconic imagery of the Golden Gate. So just for a reference, the timeline for us is actually, or the pathway I should say for us to begin this club was far from the norm. We actually were, the idea percolated from 4 previous U.S. women's national team players. Leslie Osborne, Brandi Chastain, you might know something about her, and Danielle Slayton and myself came together. It was during COVID, in fact, in the middle of 2020, and Angel City had just launched their brand, and we'd just seen how they came into the market and made a massive splash with their vision. And we were inspired, and we thought there's no reason the Bay Area should not have a team. We produce the top talent in the world, and again, we have a lot of resources at our disposal. And this idea really didn't get legs until we were able to partner up with some really bright minds in the Bay Area. We partnered with some tech executives, some VC folks as well. And we went about it in a way that I don't know that it's ever been done before. First of all, 4 previous players driving this vision. And secondly, we did it like a tech round. So how you would raise money for a tech company. We had a seed round, a Series A, and then when we got to the Series B, which was maybe a year and a half later, it became quite clear that we needed to have a lead investor. And we needed to have a lead investor, not only, there was for 2 reasons, I should say. One was to check the boxes that the NWSL required for us to become an expansion team. But more importantly, I think, was we needed a lead investor because we needed the resources and the capabilities to actually bring this vision into life. And so the 2 went hand in hand. I was fortunate enough to meet Alan Waxman, who is the CEO, co-founder of Sixth Street Capital, and he got it right away. When I met him, I told him what our vision is. We want to go big. We don't want to do this just to be a local club in the Bay Area. We want this to be an iconic global brand. And he understood the thesis. They had just actually made some investments into Barcelona, into Real Madrid. So they were dabbling in the sports space, specifically the soccer space. And this really went nicely with what portfolio they were building out in their sports investment franchise. So that partnership evolved. It was crystallized. A lot of work went into it. I won't bore you with those details. But by April 4th, 2023, we were able to announce that we were that 14th expansion team. And if you look at that timeline, it's pretty daunting because we're actually kicking a ball in less than a year from the date that we were awarded the franchise. And the runway is short. We have 0 players. We have just about 2 staff already. And we need to build a team, and we need to build our brand. We did the brand first. We'll see how that sticks. So part of the value we believe in our club is the balance of knowledge within not only our founding group, as I mentioned with Sixth Street and the 4 previous U.S. women national team players, but also the board level. Again, we have so many incredible, bright minds in the Bay Area to be able to pull from those resources in a way that's more than just an investment opportunity, in a way to grab a hold of their institutional knowledge in their space. So Sheryl Sandberg, if you're familiar with her, see, I got the laser to work. She was the COO of Facebook, or now Meta, formerly Facebook. This is an incredible woman that not only has business acumen beyond, she is probably the strongest leader I've ever seen in supporting and growing the opportunities for women globally. And that says a lot because I've come across incredible women throughout my travels, but she is one of the biggest supporters in that area. That's going to be important for us for what we look to do in terms of our community impact. Rick Welts, Stacy Slaughter, these 2, both just great sports executives in the Bay Area. Rick came from the Golden State Warriors, president, COO, Stacy Slaughter, 20-year executive at the San Francisco Giants. So these are 2 individuals that know the landscape of sport in the Bay Area, and that is incredibly valuable to us as we build out our team. And then, of course, Sixth Street being that lead investor. It's part of the thesis. It's part of the why. It's part of the reason we can. This is Alan, by the way, rocking the gear. But one of the things that they did, obviously, injecting that $125 million capital, that alone is a statement. But they're private equity, and the beauty of this partnership with Sixth Street, why it worked for the NWSL, is that they don't have any time sensitivity on their investment. So we're funded out of a $26 billion fund, but it's flexible capital, and they're making long-term investments. They understand that with us, this is a long-term investment. This is not something that they're looking to exit in the 5 to 7 years you see typically in a venture capital, private equity type of partnership. With that money, obviously, we hope to build a best-in-class training facility that is in the works already. We just need to find the land and then eventually build our own stadium, because as you know, if you own your own stadium, you have another revenue stream that you can monetize. That's incredibly important for us, as we look to be one of the top iconic global brands in the world. The Bay Area community, obviously, we're going to touch on that a bit more, but one of the things that Sixth Street is really looking to delve into, along with Sheryl Sandberg, is this idea of more than soccer and developing the complete athlete. I'll talk about that a bit more, the complete human, later. So these are not only the resources that they have are going to help us be able to build out this vision, but we're also going to be able to leverage some of the other portfolio companies they have to help us as we try to grow ourselves into a global brand. To be clear, we understand completely that we have to start locally first, and the community matters more than anything. But the dream is really to make sure that, or to see that we can do this in parallel. Because as you know, everything is open in the marketplace now with the ability to consume so much information from a worldwide perspective. So the ability to have Barcelona, Real Madrid, these champions be partners alongside of us, to be able to learn off of some of their best practices, incredibly valuable, again, for us as we stand up a company from ground zero. Our truths. Now, I'm just going to read these because we spent a lot of time working on the wording that goes into these. And I think, as you all know, in your companies that you work for, in your clubs, you talk about culture, right? You set that culture. You communicate that culture. That culture either makes or breaks you. That will be valuable for us as well, but we also thought it was important to have our brand truths, and that's part of our business proposition as we move forward. So the player truth, again, being centered on players. Players will be front and center of everything that we do at Bay FC. The player truth is to inspire excellence, to be bold and authentic while humbly serving what is greater than the self. I think there's an important lesson there in those words. And in life, you have two choices. And this is something that I want all of our players to understand. You have two choices. You can take more than what is given, or you can give more than what is asked of you. And we want our players to choose the latter every time, each and every time. And that's on the field, and that's how they show up in the world. Soccer truth, to honor love of football, the art of the game, and win trophies while doing it. Funny enough, we almost didn't have the trophy piece in there, but it felt like knowing how competitive we are, that was an important piece to what we're building out. But we never want our players to lose sight of the love of the game, because as a previous player, and many of you in this room have experienced this, as soon as you feel like you're suffocated by what is being dictated to you, as soon as you feel like you can't be free on the field, you lose your connection to the game, you lose your excellence, and we never want our players to lose sight of that. Fan truth, to ignite generational passion that creates an active, diverse, connected community. This is something you guys know all too well. This is something that you can wake up and take for granted in a sense, because you have had the historic clubs that have stood the test of time, that have garnered passion from generation to generation. We hope to be able to build that in our community and build that with our fan base locally and globally. That is one of the gifts, I think, of European football that we look to leverage off of. And it's not just doing it from generation to generation within a family. What's important to us is to be able to do it right now. So it's not just little kids that are showing up at our games. It's not just families that we're targeting. It's going to be all generations. It's families, it's kids that are in college, it's millennials, it's parents, it's grandparents. We want to bring that group of people together now, because we've had 2 previous leagues that didn't work when we catered to just the family market. For us, that's not a sustainable model. So that's incredibly important to us. Business truth, to be a catalyst for change, proving women's sports can be a top global brand while developing future leaders. Again, the global brand is the driving force, but the lasting legacy comes from developing future leaders. And that is something that is going to be pivotal and a core pillar to how we build out the add value to our athletes that we hope to recruit to bring into our club, but also the athletes that we hope to bring through the system from the ground level up. And brand truth. To build a global brand that braves conventions and transcends culture. What do you think of this? I want to hear after, by the way. I'm going to take a poll from all of you. But this is not a typical brand that you see in this space. This is, well, let me go back here. First, the Bay, you ask yourself, why the Bay? Why the Bay? I think sometimes when you're defining who you are, you need to know who you don't want to be. And for us, that was understanding that the Bay Area is this complex, rich, diverse culture. And we don't want to just be San Francisco anything, Oakland something, San Jose something, Silicon Valley anything. We didn't want to designate that we are only for one group, one area within our region. We wanted to be open our arms to the possibility of uniting the Bay Area. So it naturally fell upon this language that we wanted to be the Bay, Bay FC. That's where the idea came from. And then you look at the B, and there's so much that went into this. And Goodby Silverstein, by the way, incredible branding agency in the Bay Area. They're the ones that landed on this mark for us. Benny Gold is the designer of this. He's actually, and you will probably notice it now, but he's actually a famous streetwear designer. So he's had collaborations with Nike that have gone on to big heights in at least that streetwear space. And that was part of the mandate that we gave to Goodby when we set out on building this brand. We wanted them to build something that wasn't just a soccer crest, that wasn't just an identity, a lockup that represented the club, but it was going to be something that crossed over culturally, that permeated, that transcended soccer and permeated culture. And that's where you land on this B. It's not traditional in a sense. You can see on the left side here, this is the iconic bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge that you probably think of when you think of the Bay Area. This is where it came from. And at the top, you've got the fog rolling in and the fog rolling out. And what's great about the B, or what's really important for us with the bridge and the B, is that we do have 9 bridges that connect 9 counties in the Bay Area. We have over 101 different communities. And so the idea that we could bring these communities together, be that bridge, was really important in how we showed up in the world and how we will show up in the world. And it's not just being a bridge to connect the communities, it's also a bridge of time. If you notice, this mark is a bit more traditional in a sense. And this is a mark that has a nod to, or an homage, if you will, to a sense of permanence. And the ultimate, but with an idea that we are going to break frontiers moving forward. So that's the bridge of time that we hope to also to lean on as we look at the crest and the identity moving forward. This is, as I said, the brand that really wants to transcend soccer and permeate culture. I think when you look at the Bay Area, one of the biggest gifts of our demography is that we do have these different communities with really diverse thoughts. And it's not when you just pull from one region, one area, that you find that lightning in the bottle. It's when you bring those different views together, and that's when you can create something special. So this is really important central piece to why we built out that brand, why it looks the way it does. Our style of play. Look, the words sound poetic. I was a 10, so that's probably why. But the reality is, again, we hope to disrupt the space a bit. If you know anything, Jackie talked about it earlier. If you know anything about the NWSL, we're known as a fast-paced transitional league. We're athletic, we're strong, and we're entertaining as heck. One thing we want to do in the Bay is not take for granted that entertainment piece, but also start to disrupt the space if we can, and not in a naive way, but to start to bring more control into our style of play and into our decision making. Yes, we are going to be risk takers, but we're going to be calculated risk takers. And I think that's something that we as a league need to start to evolve into as we grow up and mature and start to bring into pieces from the European style of play into how we go about the game, at least in the NWSL, from the NWSL perspective. More than soccer, this is the idea of the central piece to our community activation. And again, this is something that's incredibly important to our vision, our thesis, because if any of you are aware of these stats, it's pretty wild that just about 15% of C-suite executives are women globally. Just about 15%. We make up 50% of the population, just 15% C-level executives. And 94% of those women have played sports competitively. And so to be able to now utilize our platform to generate leaders that go on and matriculate out of our club and go impact and change the world, not just from a football perspective, but from what they do post-playing career, that is an incredibly valuable resource that we hope our club can provide these athletes that we bring in. And it's not just at the senior level. This is something we're going to look to do for underserved communities in our area and leave that lasting legacy along with the youth academy that we hope to build out and, again, replicate what you guys have done so well over here in Europe. So the investment thesis. I mean, this is the why to everything that really started this whole vision. As you know, there's been 2 previous leagues that were professional football in America that did not survive. And while there's a myriad of reasons for it, there are 2 pieces that are probably important to highlight. One was at the club level, at the team level. It was more often than not viewed as a moral cause or a nice to have. It was not viewed as a business. That has shifted in the NWSL. That has shifted in this era. Secondly, from a league perspective, there wasn't a long-term strategy of how we're going to not only connect with our fans, but grow the game. So as we now start to look at you know, what has come about in the global game, you guys will probably know this better than anyone, but soccer is the #1 sport, not just for men, but it is the #1 choice for women as well, as they watch and choose what they hope to consume from a sporting perspective. The reality is, you know, this is an important thing that we are at an inflection point, and we're at an inflection point in women's soccer, I think largely because of the ability to consume our product. Social media has opened up the ability to connect with our female athletes. So for so long, we had gatekeepers to the women players, to the women's teams. There were people that dictated you either had the opportunity to consume their product or not. No longer is that the case. These women have shown time and time again there is an appetite, there's a demand to connect with them. There's a demand for more of them in their feeds, for more of them in their life. There's a demand for the teams and for the products that they're putting out on the field, and we're seeing that through the different platforms in which you can consume the games and the product on the pitch. It is those individual data points that are coming together to prove that the macro data is shifting. And ultimately, we think the economic reality is going to catch up with that. We've seen 87% growth in sponsorship year over year in the NWSL. And that's without owning our own stadiums. There's been 20% overall in all of women's sports year over year. 87% in the NWSL alone. 25% of our players are going to be competing in the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup. And we're actually completed our first collective bargaining agreement between the NWSLPA and the NWSL. Again, these are all signals that we are maturing as a league and that the NWSL is on a very positive path as we move forward. Salary cap as well, we've increased, and so I know you guys are going to want to talk about salary cap a little bit more. Viewership, attendance growth. If you take the top 2 clubs in the NWSL, their average attendance over the course of the season, 20,000 fans. Now, this stat blew my mind because it actually matches or surpasses the NBA and the NHL average attendance across a season. That's an incredible stat. NBA, one of the top sports in the United States. NHL, right there. 453% growth in viewership from the last championship game or 2021, excuse me, to 2022. Now, I'd like to say that that's because I was calling the game, the final, in 2022, but I think the reality is the players are much more interesting. So, again, signals are there. The signals are there that this is an undervalued market And the economic reality is going to catch up to this data. We have the ability to correct the imbalance because right now, if you look at the MLS, we again have attendance that is rivaling what MLS is experiencing if you look at our top 2 teams. Our media deal was 1/100th of MLS's deal. If you look at the investment that flows from sponsorship into women's sports, 1%. If you look at the investment dollars that flow in, that brands spend in the media, 4% of what they spend on men's. And if we move that meter just 5%, think about the ROI that all of us will experience as we invest in this platform even further. We just need marginal gains, and it's going to be massive in return economically. And brands are starting to figure that out, quite honestly. This is the thesis for the Bay Area market in general, or specifically, I should say, is that we churn out top talent in the world. On the recent World Cup roster announcement for the U.S. Women's National Team, Bay Area had over 35% of those ties. If we didn't have the injuries, we would have been closer to 50% of ties on the U.S. Women's National Team roster. It's our collegiate system, but it's also our youth development system. So we have a natural talent pool that we can draw from as we build out our club. Vibrant ecosystem, I've talked about this a little bit already, but we are home to some of the world's top leading brands or companies in the world. And not only do these companies want to partner with us, but we also have the ability to leverage their groundbreaking technology. And when we think about game day experiences, when we think about connecting with fans, all of us from a club perspective, if we're not utilizing the technology and the gains that we're making in that space, then we're going to be falling behind. So we have massive opportunity in front of us to be able to partner with these massive brands in our Bay Area. We are home to the largest tech market in America. I think more importantly, though, we are one of the most diverse areas in the world. And second most diverse city in the world is San Francisco, but if you combine our Bay Area, we're the 6th most diverse. And that is something, again, that we look to pull from as we build out our fan base, and we also have our players reflect what is real in our environment. 7.76 million people, again, massive opportunity in front of us to be able to leverage what is natural to the Bay Area. What we've seen is that when we launched our brand on a Thursday and we held an event in the city 2 days later, is that there's already the appetite for our club, for our players. We had over 5,000 people show up at our event. We didn't know what to expect, quite honestly, because this is new. And the turnout was incredible. We earned over 3 billion impressions just from that day alone, and counting. So incredible traction just from one event. We decided, by the way, to go big on this event. We almost didn't have this event. And I pressure tested the idea. What we're saying is we want to be a top global brand. How are we not showing up that way on day one? And we got behind it, and sure enough, people had an appetite for it, and it proved worth the investment. Again, theme for us, return on investment. The dollars are there. It's just a matter of leaning into the space. And that's the community support that we experienced. And at the end of the day, there is global momentum. And this is something that, hope to have many conversations with you guys about. You know what's happening in your space already. You know your game is growing. I thought it was fantastic. And this actually reflects what Vinay said yesterday, that 57% of women's football fans have just been following the game for 5 years or less. That you guys are opening the market to new fans, and that's massive opportunity moving forward, because together we can open the market, together we can grow the market. And I think that's one of the things that I'd like to leave everyone with here, and that's the idea that it isn't the NWSL versus WSL or D1 Arcamo or the different leagues in the global landscape. We have an opportunity, I think, to come together and really open the market and tell our story, sell our story, and build off of the success that we all have together. It's not only best practice sharing, but it's collaboration and how we look to monetize our brands, our clubs, as we grow the women's sports landscape that is so undervalued at the moment. Sponsors are getting it. Sponsors are leaning in. There's actually, and maybe we'll talk about it, Jackie, but there's actually a really great narrative, what Ally Financial did, knowing that only 4% of the media spend goes into 4% goes into women's sports. They committed 50-50. So they committed to spend 50% of their media spend in women's sports as they do in men's by 2027. Well, they accelerated that. They're about 40-60 in this moment, but they saw massive returns in terms of their public perception, their likability, their willingness for their consumers to believe in their brand, to take on their brand. And I think that's a story that we all collectively can start to tell more and more frequently, that the partnerships with women's soccer space, with women's sports, that there's a ton of value there to unlock because we own the demographics that these consumer brands are after. By the way, we make up 87% of controlling the dollars of consumers. Women do. So we need to start telling that story wisely. And that's it. So lean into the space. Am I?
Ali, thank you.
Which do I just get to choose?
Okay, just to still stand for a bit and
Okay.
just stand proudly in front of your slides. That has been really, really eye-opening and fascinating. And I think you need a little bit more confidence in your brand, though, and what you're doing. With that, you could probably go quite a long way, I would imagine, Ali. But so, Sixth Street, because the finances of this are fascinating. The reality, the idea, the concept, wonderful. But the actual reality of how this can all be monetized is really what we're trying to drill down to into the women's game and in terms of progressing it. So how exactly did you approach them? What made you think of them? Was it just them? Is there a lot more to it? Did you approach lots of other companies? Because frankly, watching that, it all looked great. They seem a great partner for you. You seem a great partner for them. They just give you loads of money. Everything's brilliant. You take over the Bay Area.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. When we approached them, so I basically came in contact with Alan Waxman through his wife, Charlotte Waxman. And she was actually the initial person that I had pitched because I had talked with Tom Montag, who was at the time, I think it was the COO of Bank of America, and he knew that his family, and we were really after women investors. We really were. And Charlotte Waxman seemed like the natural touch point, if you will, to help her understand where we're headed, where we wanted to go. She, by the way, was also involved in the financial sector. And so initially she looked at our P&L and our projections, our pro forma, and she poked holes in all of it. A year later, we continued building our momentum. She reached out to me again, and that's when we went to lunch, and I really started to get into the weeds of how we were going to turn this into an actual business model. And she said, you need to meet, Alan. They're investing in the sports space. This seems like it makes a lot of sense. And so then we had a lot of communications. Of course, Sixth Street is incredible in the way that they can analyze markets, the way that they actually leverage cross-platform solutions. And so it was a natural tie-in that what we were looking to build was a part of the portfolio in their sports investing business. Again, they went through their due diligence. They looked at the market. They understood that this was a very much undervalued space. And that, again, I'm going to use this language, but the economic reality is going to catch up to the data that we're now seeing. And so it's actually providing that information to the right stakeholders at the right time. And that's going to be the shift, I think, in the market. And we're just seeing the signals all go in the right direction. It's just a matter of staying in the game and continuing to invest in it for the long term.
The attitude towards perhaps women's sport in general, but certainly towards women's football or soccer in America is well known to be completely different to the history that we have in Europe, certainly in this country, where we can't hide away from the fact that we were denied the right to play for 50 years, which is why we were set back. I mean, that's just a fact. Right. So do you think, and maybe it's difficult for you to answer, but do you think that perhaps that mental attitude and the lack of historical prejudice has really, really helped you in this regard?
It's a great question. I can tell you that we personally experience his prejudice. So I sat in a room with U.S. Soccer when we were negotiating our CBA. We had just won the Olympics in 2004. And the only way we made money at that time, because we didn't have our league had ended in 2003, a new one was starting in 2009. The only way we made money was if you were called in the national team and you rostered up. And you were paid, that was how you made your check, besides your ancillary sponsorship deals that you had. U.S. Soccer threatened to go dark on us and schedule no games. That's actually, by the way, when I went and was brought over by Aulas, Jean-Michel Aulas, to play in OL as one of the first American groups that he did bring over. So it was a blessing in disguise for me, but nonetheless, we've always experienced the idea that we're not valued. When Soccer United Marketing would go to the marketplace to sell U.S. Women's National Team commercial value and U.S. Men's commercial value, U.S. Men's National Team commercial value, they didn't value the U.S. women piece. It was U.S. men, and we are an add-on. So we've always had this feeling that we were underinvested in and that we were undervalued. So I do think, or I don't think that, I actually think the reason that we drive forward is because we've been trying to prove for so long that we are worth the investment, that we are worth equal opportunity, and that has always been kind of our mentality is to go get what you want in this world, to go show the world what they need to, I guess, see before they believe.
Are you getting the sense now, and we're certainly getting the sense from your slides, that you're almost pushing at an open door now to an untapped market, really, in terms of marketing to women, marketing about women, because as we all know, sports traditionally, the marketing of it has been generally towards men, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, no doubt. And there's an appetite for our brand, not our brand, but for our product, for sure in the women's space. But I also think, Jackie, what we've gotten wrong before is that we looked at one specific market, one specific demographic, and that's really what we catered to. And that's why when you see, our B, it's the idea is to open the door, open our arms to new fans and new possibilities. The idea is if you don't know that you love football yet, you don't know that you love soccer yet, we want you to fall in love with our brand, and then you're gonna love football, and then you're gonna love soccer. So we don't wanna just target women, we don't wanna just target young girls. We're very particular in the language that we choose, because it isn't just about getting the families to the games. I know, I have triplets that are 9, and I have a 7-year-old girl. And to get me to go watch the game that that gives me my everyday passion, to get me to go to a game in person is a real challenge. So I can't be your target market. We have to open the door to the different possibilities of the different demographics, bring those communities together, and that's where we're gonna have consistency and fandom, and that's where we're actually gonna be able to grow the market.
So with Bay FC and with your commentary at various World Cups and your 4 young kids, what do you do in your spare time?
Yell at my husband.
I'm sure it's mutual. I'm sure it's mutual. Again, coming back to the finances, I have to, because this is really what we're talking about. The idea, the concept is wonderful. Yeah. 6th Street, again, they look like they're completely invested in it. But the questions will no doubt be, well, how long for? When are they going to see a return in their investment? What are they going to see in their investment? Why is it worthwhile, in actual practical terms, in them doing this? And how long is their interest going to last?
Yeah, so they have fiduciary responsibilities, right? These are people with low risk tolerance. So the idea that they might exit because they're not seeing an ROI in the near term is really not a part of the conversation whatsoever. They understand. They just did, I think, it was a 20-year deal with Barcelona, the 26-year deal perhaps. Real Madrid's deal is equally as long. So they are in this for the long game in sports in general, and in this particular... Confirmed to be.
It's tied up. It's not like, yeah, we're in it for the long term, Ali, this looks great.
Yes, exactly.
Like they are absolutely tied in for the long term.
Absolutely. And this is, again, in 5 years, I'm not going to talk about projections, but the reality is we don't think that you're going to see massive ROI within the next handful of years. It's going to take a little bit to lean into the space, and then you're going to start to see your balance sheet flip. So they're in it for the long haul. That is clearly communicated. They wouldn't be doing this. They wouldn't be building us a training center. They wouldn't be talking about building a stadium. Again, we just have to find the land, and it has to be the right time. But this is the reality that we are fortunate to be partnered with them and to be able to make this, again, hopefully become one of those top iconic global brands. But they're in it for the long haul. They're committed to this. And if they weren't, they'd lose a lot of money in the short term.
Yeah, and excuse me for banging on. I have a tendency to do this. But when you talk about that balance sheet that's going to flip, etc., could you just sort of pinpoint the areas, and you may not be able to give figures as such, but how do they get that money back? So you're talking about selling shirts.
Yeah,
you're talking about
great.
bums on
I love that
seats when
question.
you built the stadium. It's going to cost absolute fortunes. The training ground to invest to bring players in, great. But in terms of actually getting money back, how?
So I mean, any franchise, any club knows there's certain levers that you pull. Obviously, one of them is going to be your ticketing. It's going to be your game day revenue, right? So game day revenue, you pull on that lever. Again, we want to do something really special in the game day experience. Hit on all 5 senses as you walk into a stadium, things like that are, again, thinking outside the box. What does virtual reality look like? Do you actually have to be at the stadium to experience a game day experience? So can you pull on that lever? And then you look at it from a partnership, sponsorship perspective. Again, that's where most of the clubs make a lot of their money. And in those partnerships, we think there's a lot of room to grow in that space. Angel City alone landed, the highest front of kit deal that we had in 2022. We hope we can match that, exceed that. We believe, again, as we grow, the data will support higher valuations. So you pull on that lever. And then, of course, the media deal is a massive one to any league. We're currently in talks for what that's going to look like for the NWSL moving forward. And in those talks, you have to make decisions. Again, this is long-term play. What are you doing in the short term? What are you doing in the long term? In the short term, are you expanding your reach? Are you expanding the ability for people to consume your product? Or are you looking at more a short-term revenue gain? And those are just the different questions that we have to ask ourselves as a league. But that's one piece to what we can build into our P&L. And then, of course, as you look at the ability to monetize a stadium. Look at what Dallas has done in the Star area, where they built out a whole city. And it became a place where tourists file through that place. And they're creating revenue out of, in a sense, out of thin air. So it's new revenue streams that they're actually able to monetize in terms of their brand. There's possibilities for us to do that in the Bay Area. Of course, building our own stadium, now we control, what revenue flows through that infrastructure for our club. So you pull on those different levers. And again, I do think that being in the Bay Area, having access to some of these global companies, we really do have an opportunity to have, tentpole business strategies and what that looks like in terms of how we can monetize our brand, our club, our greatest athletes, our athletes. And so there's numerous ways that I think revenue is going to be pulled into our club. It's just going to be a matter of growing that and scaling it.
In the NWSL at the moment, there is no relegation. There is no championship equivalent below it. We thought there was going to be, and now there's going to be a rival league instead, but that's for another day. Is the fact that you can't get relegated key to the investment? And if you did have a league such as here, where 1 or 2 teams were going down, would you have been able to attract such wild, extremely high investment from 6th Street?
I wish I could answer that with certainty, and I cannot. I do think that relegation, or the fear of relegation, can also inspire investment, and I think that's an important piece to just contemplate as you guys think about which direction you move, because as you want to move as a unit, you're either pulling the bottom up, or you're driving from the front forward. And I always think about this. It's funny. An investment, right? Do you hold back your lead horses? In fitness, when you were running fitness, did we stop the player that was ahead of everyone, that was getting to the line first? Did we stop them? Did we slow them down and say, wait, we can't catch you? Or did that person finish and go help the bottom move along and go help the bottom finish the fitness test sooner? So I think that's the approach that we have to take as a league. I think that's potentially an important piece for European league systems to contemplate is do you want to be able to bring those people with you? Because you do have to move together. And if relegation means that people drop out and now this next group can move with you, maybe that is the right model. But I do think it would challenge anyone to know that they were going to come and invest in our league and that they might possibly be out of the league within a year. But I also think if you're thinking about investing in a big way, you're going to make sure you're not in that bottom zone.
So it probably helps knowing that you're going to be safe, your investment's safe for the foreseeable future. Yeah. But then again, in terms of the league excitement, etc., here, if there's danger of a couple of teams going down, it certainly spices things up. Whereas in your league, in the NWSL, it's a lot more equal, isn't it? The team that finished bottom last year could well finish top the next year, and that's just not the case here. So pros and cons.
Yeah.
whichever way you look at it.
Yeah, you're right. And I think, as we all know, the competition is what drives the fandom and the excitement of not knowing the outcome of a game. That is incredibly pivotal to I think, the attraction to the women's game. And beyond that, obviously, we could talk about the individual athletes that are massive revenue drivers for us because there is that connection with that fandom. But at the end of the day, the competition, being close, that is an important thesis to why we think, the NWSL is a great league to play in.
And moving from the 12 teams that you have at the moment to the 14 when you will join, and then potentially further expansion as well after that, because everybody seems to want a ticket to this particular party, it seems. And are you concerned at all about their talent pool? I mean, you have a huge talent pool. You have a college system, which is very different here. You produce athletes. They're fit. They're 23 years of age. They run around tracks lots and lots of times, as well as kick lots of football.
Oh, Jackie, you're better than that.
No, but they are fit. They are strong athletes that you are bringing out of college who have been coached in that period to hit the ground running, almost literally, aren't they?
Yeah.
How are you, in terms of that talent pool, are you completely happy that you have enough depth? And do you think you'll be trying to bring in more players from Europe?
I would be absolutely concerned if we were only pulling from the United States. I think the beauty, again, when I talk about partnership globally, this is a really important piece to how we move together in women's football, is that the talent pool globally is so much better than when I ever played. I'd be the first one to say that the games that I played in 2003, those games, the quality wasn't there the way it is now. And so not only are the players better, not only is the game faster, more evolved, more nuanced, more tactical, more technical, but now you've got greater depth of talent to draw from. So yes, when you expand, there potentially can be a drop-off, but if we do our job right, and we look at the global market, and we don't just look at the United States to pull our talent in, then I don't think we're gonna have that drop-off. I think there are so many areas that we can access to pull talent from that we quite honestly have not tapped into yet. So I am not concerned in the short term, and I'm certainly not concerned in the long term.
Yeah, Fran from Manchester United dropped the odd bomb yesterday about salary caps, didn't she? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, we come here, my perspective on salary cap is I have a lot of thoughts on it. But I think it's very difficult to have, there's pros and cons to everything. And in business, you just have to weight what you value more than, and how you force rank the outcomes of those decisions. With the salary cap, I think it's very challenging in the global landscape because if we're the only ones with a salary cap, the rest of the world can then go and pay for the top players in the world. And as I said before, I believe one of the most pivotal pieces to building any brand, to building any club, is to have players and personalities that people want to connect with, that they want to follow on their journey. And if we can't bring those players into our team, into our league, then I do think that we're missing an opportunity. So with a hard cap, or with a salary cap, I should say, and it's not globally enacted, then we are actually putting ourselves at a disadvantage in terms of being able to bring in the top talent in the world. If everyone did it, maybe it's a more level playing field. That's why it works in the NFL. That's why it works in the NBA, because it's not a global game. It's a United States game for the large, for the majority of where people want to play in that first division. So I think it's a risk. It's a risk to enact it, but the value, as we all know, of doing a salary cap is the idea that you can maintain competitive parity. And as said before, that is also one of the driving factors of why people love consuming the women's game, at least in the NWSL and the women's product. So those two theories, or those two realities, are actually at odds with each other. And there's a necessary, I think, healthy competitive tension that exists there. And I think if we work through that space together globally, I think that we're going to be in a really good position to have a sustainable model in women's football moving forward in a way that the men's game is tripping over a bit.
In terms of player recruitment, you hinted there and you showed some superstar players who come from your region and how you'd love to have dragged them into your roster perhaps a few years ago. But the talent is there, certainly. And in terms of player recruitment and character. I'm quite fascinated by this because I just happen to think that we could be using players a lot more to sell the product, to tell them when the games are, to tweet out the links and, hey, we're playing on Saturday in this stadium, come along. It doesn't seem to happen quite as much as perhaps it could for whatever reason. Is that something you're going to be focused on with your recruitment? The characters, the people who, they all seem to speak well to camera. Do media train players at birth in America? I don't know. But they seem to be so confident in their own skin, so many players. And are you going to use them, for want of a better word, to actually bring in more supporters?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that'll be part of our decision-making process as we build out our roster. Is what is their ability to generate fandom? That's going to be a central figure to how we make that decision. Obviously, playing, their ability to play football is a massive leader before that, But the reality is, Jackie, to your question, the reason players don't necessarily spread the word about their game, about their appearances, about their team, about their club, is that we haven't done a good enough job of selling them on the value proposition of us growing the enterprise value together. That when we win as a club, when we win as a league, they win as players. And we have not done a good enough job of explaining that, I think, to these players where they can digest it and understand that they have a stake in this game, that they have a stake in our success. I think as a player, I can tell you, and you were one as well, you're so what is in it for me? What's in it for me? If I go to this appearance, what are you paying? What's my return? What's my ROI? And if you're not sold that narrative and that message about believing in the long-term proposition, the long-term enterprise value, then you're going to be resistant to lean into that. So absolutely, our players are going to understand that they're our most important asset, and I hate to say asset, but they're our most valuable, most important piece to everything that we do. They're central in every decision we make, and we need to lean on them to not only grow our brand, grow the connection, but also be the storytellers that they're so incredibly gifted at. Because as you said, US players had to know how to tell their story long before social media was a thing. Because there were those gatekeepers to our messaging. There was those gatekeepers to consuming, again, the women's soccer players. So you had to be your own best advocate and your own best brand ambassador long before social media. And I think that's part of why typically Americans are very good at brand building without even getting trained in the area.
I could probably ask you about another 30 questions myself, but that would be rude because I've asked you lots already, and I'm sure there are people in the room who would love to ask Ali a question. There's probably something we haven't covered as yet. We do have a roving microphone. If anybody wants to put their hand up. Would you like to ask Ali a question? You'll just very oh, there we go, right at the front. Oh, hello, Laura.
Thanks for a great presentation, Ali. Laura McAllister from Wales, and I'm a UEFA Exco member. I just wondered, I thought your truths were really wonderful and they come across fantastically. But I wonder what might happen if there becomes a clash between any of those truths as the club develops, because that often happens, the tension or the friction between them. And then secondly, I mean, you're a brand new club and, I can see the goals are hugely aspirational and really exciting. But in European football, we have the history and the connection of the locality, and the fans often come with very strong opinions about how the club should develop. Is there a risk for you in not having that sort of hinterland, if you like, of how the fans emotionally connect with the club? And if things don't go right, might they not just abandon you for another franchise, if you see what I mean?
So to go back to your first question on the brand truths, yeah, absolutely. There's always going to be moments when we have to force rank what we're valuing over what is seemingly to be at odds with maybe the leading truth that we're looking to stand behind. I think if it's coming down to whether or not a player or a member of our club is not adhering to those truths and not utilizing that as their decision-making North Star, if you will, then we quickly will be able to move on, I think, away from people that aren't necessarily going to buy into what we stand for, whether that's culturally, whether that's from a brand truth perspective. I do think that, when you look at it, business truth, player truth, those two things, I don't know how, at the end of the day, they're going to be at odds when you talk about fan truth. We need all of those to exist for us to be successful. And I think that, navigating our way through that is maybe it's trimming around the edges in some areas, but I think we're going to be able to, bring those together and be able to find, I guess, what our North Star continues to be. From a perspective of not having maybe that tradition set in the culture and to be able to rely on when times are tough. I think that goes back to why our community engagement piece, and I don't know that I touched on it long enough, but central to our business model, central to everything we want to do as a club, is to leave that lasting legacy in the community. And if you build meaningful connection to your community and you show that you are genuinely interested in elevating the community, genuinely interested in activating in the community, and you start to build those relationships in a way that people see, and it's not just once a month, not just when season kicks off, but you're always engaging the community. That's something Angel City has done so well down in LA. And look at they're not winning. Julie Ehrman, you're not winning, but your fans are still showing up, and I think that is one of the most important pieces to what we do, to build that relationship as quickly as possible and as strong as possible. And then from there, we can generate that, hopefully, generational passion that gets passed down. But we don't have what you have here, and we wish we did.
Any more questions for Ali?
I talked too long, I know, I'm sorry.
No, you haven't at all. We've just got a couple of minutes left. Just while, if anybody has any questions, have a think and put your hand. Oh, yes, hello, and please introduce yourself. Thank you.
You might need a translator for my Scottish accent.
I was reaching for my translations.
Yeah, thank you. Amy McDonald from Rangers. I just wonder about your brand identity in terms of strips and being able to really build that and affordability. Obviously, to move into a strong clothing brand identity in a world that's struggling economically in terms of costs, so to buy strips, have you thought about how you connect to your community in terms of that showcase of brand and that diversity?
So I do need to translate a little bit. So I'm joking, but you're asking, are we thinking about people that might not be able to afford our merchandise?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that's something that we're actively looking for the right solution to, because it's a really important piece to what we're doing, is that we want to be a brand for all. We want to be a brand for all the different communities in the Bay Area, and that goes for the people that maybe can't afford to play. That means the people that can't afford to necessarily pay for a ticket, that can't afford to buy our merchandise. And through our academy system, we will have a free system for these players to come through. So we'll provide that opportunity in that way. But in terms of being able to come to our games, yes, we're going to, there's creative solutions around this, and I can get very specific and tactical with you. But one way could be when we have a sponsor that has a suite, and that game day, they're actually handing out tickets. They're not going to be active in that, or they're not going to show up at the game, and we're going to give those tickets to the community and people that can't afford to come to the game. Of course, when we're talking about wide reach for merchandise, that's something that I don't know what our solution for is at the moment, but it is something we're actively contemplating, because it's very important to us to not have barriers to our brand. Through just the price point, but also maintaining, the brand truths in the process, if that makes sense, or what the brand stands for.
Your Scottish is very, very good.
So's yours. I'm talking of fan engagement, Ali. I was fascinated when I went to do the CBS main channel game at Washington Spirit. Michelle Kang's team, who are doing really well this season under English coach Mark Parsons, with Dawn Scott. They've got fabulous backroom staff there. Really interested as I walked from the OB trucks up towards the commentary position, and I turned around to my producer and I'm like, what's all this stuff? And it was this match day experience that had been put there. There were these high tables where you could just go and buy a beer and just stand and socialise with your friends before the game. There was a soft play area. You'd be happy with that, with lots of children.
Yes.
A soft play area over there, place to have beer, candy floss, cotton candy, stuff. face painting, fußball. So it was catering for all kind of needs. And of course, as a club, you can't be in control specifically of the performance on a match day or the result. But you can be in control of the experience of fans. So when they're buying their tickets, they know they're going to go and meet up with people. They know the kids are going to get the face painted. Folks can go and have a beer before the game, get your nachos, whatever. Is that something that you're really conscious of doing? Is that something that you think has already been explored a great deal in America?
Yeah, I think it's, look, I think every community has to do what's right for their community and their market. And I think time will tell us what the demand is in terms of whether that model is successful for our club in particular. But absolutely, we're contemplating that. When we think about the game day experience, I don't want it to be just show up 30 minutes before the game, show up at game time, leave 10 minutes before the game is over because you want to beat traffic. I genuinely, and this is a daunting goal, but I want it to be a game day experience where you actually plan your day around it. This is something you intend to do from morning until you decide it's time to go home. And so how do we provide solutions that make that an exciting prospect for our fans? We have a lot of creative ideas that we're mulling over, but absolutely it's part of what we're looking at from a business perspective of what does that environment feel like. One thing I will say is that I've seen in stadiums is that the game no longer becomes the focal point, and that kids, families, they'll go and if they have the access to those game day experiences during match time, they'll actually leave the match and go play on whatever whether it's foosball, whether it's the bouncy house, the slides, whatever we've created, manufactured for the game day experience. They'll leave and go partake in that instead of watch a game. And that's absolutely something that I do not want to see happen.
Pre-match.
Yeah, pre-match, okay, but not during the game. One of the beauties of Qatar, I think, and what you guys have to a certain extent here, is that in Qatar, you couldn't go consume alcohol while you're watching the game. And at first, I was kind of bummed about that because I did get to watch a few when I wasn't working. And then I realized this was such a gift because I wasn't thinking about, when am I going to get my beer while I watch the game? When am I going to go do it? It's a goal kick. And I was only focused on the game, and it was almost a liberating idea. And you guys do that here so well in Europe, where you don't get to bring your beer, pitch side. And so it feels very separate from actually consuming what you're there to consume. And that is the beauty of the game, the product that's on the field. And so getting that balance right in America, we can nail that. Like, that's where some secret sauce is without losing revenue in the process.
It's interesting. And it's another way of bringing in community vendors, isn't it? You've got your candy floss stand, and you've got your local beer outlet, and they can all come and be part of your pre-match community match day, can't they? Well, thank you so much.
Yes.
We have rinsed you dry. Thank you so much. Hopefully it's been worthwhile you coming over. Ali Wagner, everybody.